Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here. Everything is in its place and everything is in order in the world because we're here with Garui Khandekar. And welcome to the show yet again, Garui. We love to have you on our show.
Thank you, Jay. It's such a pleasure. I look forward to it always.
Same here. So this is called Midnight in Brussels, and we're still doing Midnight in Brussels, although there has been, and by the way, that means that it's 12 hours difference. So while it's 12 o'clock here in Honolulu, it's 12, midnight in Brussels right now, ergo Midnight in Brussels with Garui Khandekar.
Yes, and a whole new day.
And so now for the past several months, we've been associating you with Free Day, which is a think tank out of Brussels and Madrid, was it? But now things have changed. Now you've organized your own think tank, and it's called Global Relations Forum, and we are so excited and happy for you. Can you tell us what happened?
Thank you so much. Well, think tanking is all about having your opinion out there as well, but it also depends a lot on funding. And Free Day's funding situation has gone down, especially with the crisis in Spain, and it affects people here. But I also wanted to do something by my own. And so I launched this think tank with my sister, who's also an author. She has her doctorate, and she really specializes on the UN and the multilateral system. So she's a scholar. She's the main scholar. And so we co-founded this think tank in Pune, in India, my hometown. And I'm opening the office here in Brussels. And the main objective is to really have strong opinions out there, undeterred by political forces, if you may, but really objective, practical opinion, as a think tank should do.
That sounds a lot like what we do, actually, Garui. We like to tell it like it is. And have the freedom to make opinions and hopefully, keep things clear in the world so that people at least have the opportunity to know what's really going on. That's great. Congratulations in every way. So happy for you.
Thank you, Jay.
We are.
And I really believe that, and especially because I'm Indian, I have a very different view from what is circulated in Europe. I tend to have a kind of held back kind of view, not a held back view, but a very different view, a third party view. So I can see things more clearly, more objectively. And that's why I think that, such opinion should be valued in the sense and, should definitely be put out there because it's a more pragmatic, more kind of objective view. So
yes, okay. Well, we want that. I mean, you are actually now you're even even a better guest because of what happened here. This is really spectacular. We are so happy.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
So anyway, let's our agenda today will start with Greece. Although I think the world is getting tired. Sorry, but it's getting tired of hearing about Greece.
Yes.
But can you update us on what's going on in Greece and where it looks like Greece and the EU is going right now, and whether it's to a good place?
Yes. Well, the last part is debatable, but catching up on Greece, I so agree with you that it's done, and it's we're tired of it, and everywhere around the globe actually more people outside of Europe are tired of it than inside of Europe. So since the last time we spoke, so the Greeks had their referendum on the budget, which they passed with a no vote, but the government went ahead and had the bailout package still, and since then the Greek parliament approved this budget, this bailout, and so it has been approved, and Greece did not default on its loans. But the German parliament also had a vote on whether or not they should accept this bailout, to give Greece the bailout. And that I found was very surprising, because if you have 28 EU member states all voting in their parliaments, and if you get no votes in like more than half, then what do you do,
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the German parliament did vote yes. And this has been a tough decision to take anyways for all of Greece's creditors and all of the global community even and the global creditors. So thankfully, the deal has gone through. Also, if you know, we've spoken a lot about Mr. Yanis Varoufakis, the finance minister, and just a day before the main negotiations, the referendum, he was either fired or he resigned. I mean, you don't know the intricate details behind it. But anyways, he left his position. And since then, he's been leaking a lot of information. For instance, that the Greeks they have a contingency plan for reissuing their old currency, the drachma. So this is creating a little bit of controversy again. But the deal is in place and everything is going ahead as usual. Now, the part where we really debate the issue is seeing whether this is good or not, you know. I don't think this is very good for for the global economy anyways, or for Greece or for the EU or the Eurozone. And this is because it's a continuation. There is a lot more of the continuation of the debt, of the payments, of this crisis situation than it's a resolution of it. So it's more muddling through than
Well, you know,
anything.
it's funny you say that because in yesterday's New York Times, there was a significant op-ed piece on the first page of the Sunday Review by Joseph Stiglitz. And he's a Nobel laureate in economics, professor at Columbia, and he wrote The Great Divide, Unequal Societies and What We Can Do About Them. And he wrote this piece called Greece, the Sacrificial Lamb. The conditions imposed on this country make it a kind of debtor's prison. So this is not necessarily, according to him, going to work. And in fact, it might lead to long-term resentment, and we'll wind up back where we were. Thoughts?
I so agree with him. I mean, how could you go against Joseph Stiglitz, right? He's somebody I really admire, and his writings have been quite influential. Um, he's very right, and Yanis Varoufakis, so the ex-finance minister, also said that this whole debt procedure, giving Greece more debt, it's like financial waterboarding, and Greece is coming into and Greece is becoming into a debt colony. Those are the terms he used, and I think that's really true, in that sense, and just adding more debt to a debt-ridden economy is really not the right way to go. But I also liked what he said about the divided society, because here in Europe, you have really economies, and especially in the Eurozone. So the Eurozone is this group of 19 EU member states that have the same currency, the euro. And here you have very advanced economies like Sweden, Germany, of course, Finland probably, but then you have really poor countries like Greece now, and which is impoverished, I would say. There are soup kitchens coming up, but also other smaller EU member states, and they're still at a very low stage of financial catch up with the more richer countries. So I think that is really a divided society, and to have a same currency but without a common fiscal union,
Yeah.
that is the main issue.
But this actually brings to mind a very interesting connection, I think, with another article that was in the New York Times yesterday, and it was about China, how China is doing business, and I use that term loosely, in South America now. It's advancing capital, building big projects for its own benefit. It's making loans for its own benefit. And it's developing economic leverage for its own benefit. And this is a replay of what it has done in Africa in the same vein. And, on the one hand, you go, well, that's nice that China is, doing these projects, building dams and all kinds of big earth-moving type of project, infrastructure. But at the same time, it creates a disparity. and a leverage that China will build into that deal. So although at first it seems charitable, when you look again, you realize that they hold their economic controls at the throat of the country that was receiving this ostensible benefit. And it goes for Stiglitz's basic proposition. It's a kind of debtor's prison. And I think there are debtor's prisons in more places than just Greece. What do you think?
I'm really not anti-Chinese in that sense, because I mean the one aspect that you can compare it to in a way, this a great external engagement, is colonialism. So what Europe did basically in Africa, in Asia, and in in the Americas as well to a certain extent is colonialism, and that was exploitation. So they literally drained out the resources of these countries, continents even, and pushed them back to Europe. In contrast, so you have a lesser devil in that sense. You have China, which is at least building bridges, even if it's to its own interest. Because frankly, in Europe, you have so many countries that are, most of them, if they do business in Africa or Asia, it's for their own gains, right? I mean, there's nothing that's called countries, it's all interests. So countries are basically interests. And they pursue their interests internationally. Out of personal experience, I can honestly say that when I was in Uganda, I was volunteering there in the villages, in really the most rural part of Uganda. And there I saw everybody with one or even two cheap Chinese mobiles. Everybody was connected, and this is Chinese. And, you could see, okay, fine, they make their gains, but at least even the grassroots people are benefiting. And sorry, excuse me. And what the Chinese also introduced is this concept of mobile money, which means that those people with their SIM cards, with their Huawei phones, they could transfer money from their phones to pay their rent, to pay their electricity. So, I mean, you cut the middleman, you also cut the banking system largely. And this concept of mobile money is now being introduced actually in other countries, like even India. So it's quite remarkable. And I would really think that everybody's pursuing their interests. At least there's something to show,
Well, it's true, and there are benefits, and China, in a sense, can be said to be improving these places dramatically. And I wonder where the U.S. fits. President Obama's trip to Kenya sounded like visiting the old neighborhood rather than really establishing new economic relations. And I think the Chinese are very good at that. Look what they've done in Southeast Asia. And this all suggests, our whole discussion suggests that the U.S. ought to be more active and take a page out of China's book, don't you think?
You know what? I think it's an ideological divide there, because this group of 77 countries, right, with India leading that group, and China was also a part of it, they really believe in this non-aligned movement, which means non-interference in other states' matters. And that is a principle which is one of their driving forces of their foreign policy. So they would do business with you, even if you're a dictator, even if it doesn't mean that, the profits trickle down to the poor, and they would even do business with you if you would execute innocent people in your country. So, they won't care of it. That's not to say that they don't care about it at all, because from my research as well, when countries, not really China always, but even India or Brazil or South Africa, what they do is they call it constructive engagement. So they believe that socializing really helps to kind of pull that country or the dictatorship towards democracy in a way. Now, what the West has is this concept of black and white, carrots or sticks. And if you're not good, if you don't implement all our liberal democratic principles, you're not good enough. And that's not something which you really can expect from the poorest of the poor nations in a way. Because that's just how it is, you know. Even Gaddafi, he was like a warlord, but he kept his people under control. And when you try to implant democracy forcibly, you have utter chaos. That just doesn't work. I think democracy really needs to grow. And one of the examples there, when when President Obama was in Kenya, is when he spoke about gay rights, right? And the Kenyan president just said, well, that's a non-issue. And there you have it. You know, these countries now have other options, which is the big Asian and Latin American countries. And those countries treat them as rather equals, and they won't talk down to them in that sense in how they perceive it. And they're getting a lot of opportunities from these countries. So it's becoming tougher and tougher for the West to really have any influence internationally in the light of this kind of factors.
One thing is clear is that things are moving and moving globally. That's why Global Relations Forum is the perfect name for your new think tank. It's Garui Khandekar. We're going to take a minute break. We'll be back to talk about Turkey and ISIS, which is really very important. We need to cover that. I'm going to cover it in 1 minute. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Chris Leatham, and I'd like to invite you to come and watch my show every Wednesday at 3. I'm interested in a variety of issues that have to do with politics and our local business economy. And I'd like to bring on guests who like to talk about everything from technology to social media to what we can be doing to improve our environment. And so I'd like to invite you every Wednesday at 3 to stay and watch my show here with ThinkTech Hawaii. And I'll see you there.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar here on ThinkTech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching ThinkTech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad. It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
Okay, we're back. We're live with Garui Khandekar, midnight in Brussels. She has stayed up late for us, yet still again, and we're going to find out from her and her new company, Global Relations Forum, what's going on, especially now in Turkey and ISIS. So ISIS came around and created a tumult on the towns within Turkey and on the Syrian border. And Turkey, all of a sudden, it's like waking the sleeping lion, isn't it? Now Turkey is attacking ISIS and going to, what is it, NATO? They want a NATO meeting. They want to take affirmative steps right away, proactive, where they have been very quiet in the past. What happened here?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's just a turnaround in a way. The Turkish forces were attacked by ISIS, and now they're bombarding PKK forces in Iraq as well, the Kurds, and then they're bombing the ISIS as well, you know. I just saw a very funny cartoon about two ISIS guys talking to each other and saying, now we have our own air force, you know. Because, yeah, because the Turks are also bombing the Kurds who are fighting ISIS. And really, I mean, in the break, we spoke about how there might be some other geopolitical reasons at stake. I really don't know. I mean, one of it could be Iran deal, which has gone through, and the position of Iran is becoming stronger. And, there are a lot of countries which are going out to Iran now, the big players, for energy, for a greater role in Central Asia even. And I think Turkey is, because it comes right in the background of this deal that's come through. So the only reason, the plausible reason for me is Iran, and the role it can play now in Syria, because the sanctions will be lifted soon. and how that might affect Turkey.
So, well, we had a host on our show, was an Israeli, about a year ago, and he made it clear to me, this is Rafi Boritzer, that Turkey, we underestimate Turkey. We don't realize how much influence Turkey has on the whole Middle East, and certainly on the Israeli, fight with its neighbors. We don't realize that Turkey is essentially an extension of the West. That Turkey, has strong military forces. That Turkey has important strategical alliances. That Turkey is a formidable adversary. And Turkey also is, willful. When it makes a decision, usually it follows through, and it's a serious matter. I remember, just to tell you a short story, when I first came to Hawaii, 1965, there was a Turkish ship at Pearl Harbor. And the captain of the ship communicated with the captain of the Pearl Harbor base. He said that one of his sailors had committed an offense, and the captain intended to hang the man on the ship at the dock, and he wanted to know if that was okay with the commander of Pearl Harbor. And the commander of Pearl Harbor said, we don't hang people here. And we certainly don't want you to hang anybody here, so don't do that. And the Turkish captain steamed his ship 3 miles out. He hung the man and came back. And that's what I call willful. The Turks are a special breed. And I wonder what's playing here. What part of their, what do you want to call it, cultural personality? What kind of their way of looking at the world is playing out when they immediately change position on a series of events near their border with ISIS and the Kurds, and now they're way different than they were before, without checking out the consequences. I mean, there will be consequences here, no?
Yes, I completely agree with your analysis. Turkey is very tricky in that sense. It's like a chameleon, kind of, because it has one foot in the east and one foot in the west. And it's really, it wants to have an EU identity. Turkey's one of the longest in the waiting line for EU membership. It wants to become an EU member state. But the Europeans don't want Turkey and its 100 million plus Muslims. And so the Turkish issue is pending, but it still has a European or Western identity, and it's also, its alliances with NATO and its special relationship with the US, actually. On the other hand, Turkey is a very Middle Eastern power as well. It has this very Middle Eastern identity, and it's an important geopolitical player all the way up to South Asia, with its links with Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. So it's quite an influential player. It's also a global middle power now. So people are really accepting it as a country that can have global ramifications, but more regional level, but which could be felt globally. So I think Turkey is really one of the enigmas of the 21st century, I would say. And now, recently, its change of position is really surprising. There's the obvious factors, because the Turkish forces came under attack. And you're right, Turkey has a very strong will, and they're very formidable force. But I also think that maybe Turkey is waking up to the threat of ISIS, that maybe its intelligence really intercepted some plans or something. But I honestly think that, if Syria collapses, or if it's the crisis spreads from really Iraq to Syria, and then Turkey is no far, and then Iran is a very strong country as well in the region. Its forces are quite strong as well, and not to be underestimated. So I guess the geopolitical ramifications of a failed Syria and Iraq, plus the military equipment that they would have at hand, the ISIS forces, I think maybe it's waking up to that.
Yeah, well, and the other thing I would throw into this conversation is that back starting about 2 years ago, it became clear that Turkey was not all that stable, and Erdogan was not all that well liked by the people of Turkey. To wit, the protests at Taksim Square and Istanbul, they really showed you something about the way things work in Turkey, and that there's a younger generation and an older generation. There's
Yeah.
a generation of Muslims, although they're kind of westernized Muslims. They're moderate Muslims, but nevertheless, Muslims and Christians. It's not clear where the country could go, how it could shift, and
Yeah.
if for example, with all of the way that ISIS plays the game, ISIS if Syria falls, ISIS will go to Turkey next, and that's very threatening. And they could find people in Turkey that arguably would support them and help them and give them a base of operations. This must be very scary for Turkey, and the move for Turkey to call for a NATO meeting, which presumably would be for collective defense, is a pretty dramatic move.
It is.
And so my question to you is, so let's assume, well, first question is, will NATO agree to the meeting that Turkey requests? And if it does, what's the conversation? What are they going to be talking about? What's Turkey after for that meeting?
I I honestly think that NATO would stand with Turkey, because Turkey's been really quite a important supporter of especially the US within NATO, but NATO as a whole. I mean, it's a Muslim country in the Middle East that is part of NATO as well. I don't think NATO member countries have the appetite for anyone at the moment to invoke an Article 5. I just don't think they would go for it, because also, the crisis is a big part of Europe now, and Europe is already in holiday mode in a sense. I mean, literally institutions are closed here in Brussels for the month of August and part of July. Article 5 would be a step too far,
What
And,
is Article 5 again, Gary?
Article 5 is collective defense. So it means that an attack on one is considered as an attack on all. And all NATO member states must go to war, basically, or defend the partner. And so Turkey, even if it does push for it, I don't think most European member states would agree to it, because also the defense budgets have been going down, and they have no appetite here for any kind of confrontation, military confrontation, because public opinion doesn't support it. And also the US probably would not be too happy, because they've been wanting to pivot to Asia for so long now, and just events keep on coming up that are stalling them, I think. Although the Middle East is still a priority for the US, but less and less so as the US becomes more energy secure. So
Yeah. Well, some thoughts about that. First of all, it seems to me that Turkey is the buffer. In other words, if I were in Europe and I had heard all the threats that ISIS would come to Europe in one way or another, whether directly, by marching through places like Turkey and the soft underbelly, or simply by coming and doing terrorism on a leapfrog basis. If I were in Europe, I'd be concerned that could be realized. On the other hand, it's not war per se. I mean, it sounds like Article 5 talks about war and mutual defense, but what exactly would the Turks be asking for? Because war doesn't really. What is war anymore? War is different. war, flying in with a plane and bombing someone, is that war? Or is, intelligence war? And is drones war? Is putting troops, you have to put troops on the ground to do war? I really wonder whether Article 5 is up to the modern redefinition, the Middle Eastern redefinition of war. It's not like it was.
You're right. I agree with you. War is not war anymore. And the first thing you see here in the media is no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, you know? So they're very willing to, or reluctantly willing to undertake a sortie, you know, with the airplanes flying over and bombing targets. But nobody's going to enter into foreign territory anymore. Article 5, well, I think Turkey would rather explore cooperation. I think it would ask for more support from NATO states, more airplane attacks, more intelligence cooperation, or drone attacks, like you said. You know, Article 5 would be like the limit. You know, and I don't think most NATO member states want anyone invoking it too soon, too often. I think what Turkey would ask is really for more cooperation, like you said, you know. It's already opening up one of its most strategic bases to the US. And that's a first step. And I think that it would certainly look for cooperation from its European partners. But that said, you know, Turkey has already been serving as a kind of a transit zone for the ISIS fighters, because most of the fighters that have gone to European fighters that have gone to Syria have gone via Turkey, and it has been functioning as this kind of this tunnel in a way, you know, towards ISIS land. So it already does that. And I think European states are quite wary of Turkey's role in that sense. In that sense, I could definitely say that bilateral counterterrorism cooperation would be very strong with Turkey.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting that what this shows us, Turkey's move to attack them, open up the bases to the U.S., Turkey's request for help from NATO, it shows us that ISIS isn't going away anytime soon, that ISIS is still around, still threatening, and somehow is closer on the western border now than they were before. They are more threatening to Europe in general than they were before. And that's what you can take away from all of this. But there's more. And I'd like to discuss with you exactly how this whole sequence does affect U.S. policy, particularly in the wake of the Iran deal, and maybe in combination with the Iran deal. Right after this short break, Garui Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, joining us midnight in Brussels. We so enjoy these discussions. We'll be right back.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is PJ and I'm the host of Hawaii Sports Update. I am very interested in local sports and that's why I host the Hawaii Sports Update show. I bring in guests from Hawaii, I bring in guests from UH, I bring in guests from the community, I bring in big names, I bring in small names, I bring in all names that are community related and doing positive things, sports related in the community. Come join me every Tuesday at 1 p.m. here on Hawaii Sports Update. You can also join me on my golf tournament, the first annual PJ Sports Radio Show golf tournament. It's going to be held at Coral Creek. For any information, go to ThinkTech Hawaii, INC, and friend us. The PayPal and a summary of the event will be right there available for you. And don't forget to tweet us.
You know, if countries wanted to destroy ISIS, they would have. To be very honest, I don't know what what goes on behind that, because war is an industry in itself, and I mean, if global powers could not destroy the Taliban, I mean, they're like literally shepherd warriors in a way. I don't know how, I doubt that ISIS can be defeated anytime soon.
Yeah, well, they have a new model. It reminds me of the American Revolution with the the British in their red coats and the Americans fighting behind every tree and using a kind of guerrilla approach to things.
Yeah.
The more informal a given side gets, the more difficult to see and attack. The more advantage they have. This happened. You can count all the war. This happened in Vietnam, right? And
Yeah.
so more of the same. This is more of an evolution of the underdog warriors who operate with propaganda in mind, don't have a lot of resources, don't have big weapons, but they move fast, very nimble, and that gives them an advantage over the big guy. And we play the role of the big guy, who are really not willing to put our troops on the ground, who have all kinds of political restraints about getting into it, and all we can do is fly remote control weapons and see if we can't hit them. But that's not. I agree with you. That's not necessarily going to win the day, and we could be engaged in a long, slow, losing engagement with them for a long time, and over time they'll pick up steam because of that. Nothing breeds success like success. If they're successful in getting into a new country, in attacking someone they haven't attacked before, in having the appearance of expanding their borders or crossing someone else's borders, that will draw more people from other places, to help them out. And using propaganda, they'll take advantage of that. So right now, it seems to me, and I'm not that close to it, but it seems to me that they're doing very well.
Yeah. I mean, what I was thinking that, well, if you go back to the Second World War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Germany was defeated in like how many years?
4 years.
Yeah, it's a limited amount of time. I think when a crisis threatens the way of life, and especially Western way of life, like literally threatens it, and threatens markets, I think that's the time when the West really acts and gets, rid of the problem in a way, which they can do, in a very limited time. They can do it, but I just think that, it's not yet threatening the Western way of life. And the main actors are the West. I mean, India, China, Russia are not getting their feet dirty,
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that the crisis would go on until it becomes existential for the West.
Well, let's move on to other topics. We only have a few minutes left. Let's talk about the UK. Your thought was that the UK should stay in Europe. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the UK is a special position. It has a special position in Europe now, because they would have a referendum. So when David Cameron was campaigning for for the elections, he promised the people that he would hold a referendum on membership to the EU. And I know we've discussed this in past episodes as well. I think the UK is confused. They need to stay inside Europe for geopolitical reasons, because they cannot let European developments just happen without any influence. But they don't also agree with everything that happens in Europe, and they want their independence, their sovereignty, but they want the control. And guess what? You can't have it both ways. Barack Obama really, he emphasized that he would really like the the UK to stay in Europe, because, well, let's face it, the UK is the strongest ally of the US in Europe, and they need their good friend there to help move the EU in one direction or the other, or to even see how developments take place. So Yeah, for the US, it's great that the UK would stay and they're really pushing for it. The UK for now does really want to stay because it's important that they stay, but they need more. They want to claw back more sovereignty from the EU.
Yeah. Well, you know what, but throw this in the hopper. Is they're doing well. The UK has a good economy, am I right? Things are doing pretty
Yes.
well. London is a happy place. And that gives them a kind of confidence that enters into their decision process. If it wasn't so good, if there were, problems at the edges, if there were deterioration in their markets and their productivity, it would be different. They would be then looking for more dependency, more involvement in Europe, wouldn't they?
Yeah. You're very right. And the UK economy, also its currency is very strong, so they're very happy with that. And they don't see the necessity of, being in the EU for financial security. That said, what the UK is, one of the gripes of the UK is that um, people from Europe are coming over and working in the UK, and they can freely do so. They have a right to free movement, all EU member states. But a lot of them also latch on to the UK's benefits system because the UK is a social welfare state. The hospitals are free, doctors are free, and they do have a good welfare package. And a lot of this money is going to immigrants, European immigrants especially. And I see in the UK mail every in the UK newspapers almost every day something or the other to do with immigrants. How they're stealing their benefits, or how they're pinpointing to crimes committed by immigrants. So yeah, I mean they feel the pinch in that sense.
Yeah. Well, and and that's a topic for us to talk about next time. We've talked about it before. The migration thing that's happening between Middle East and Africa and Europe. This is happening at a very rapid rate, and it's affecting every country, including Scandinavia. But for now, I'd like to go to the last point in our agenda here today, and that is your new paper. Because we're always, Garui, we're always interested in your papers. And this paper is about Russia after Crimea, the view from Asia. What an interesting topic. Can you give us an idea about what you covered in this paper?
Thank you very much. Well, basically, what I explore is how Asia has reacted to the Ukraine crisis and the Russian annexation of Crimea. And basically, Asia is very divided. While the main players in Asia, China and India, have been rather supportive of Russia in their lack of opposition, even and on the other hand, you have Japan, Australia, and New Zealand who are outraged, literally outraged. Now, one of my main findings here is that most of these countries in Asia have even foregone their national interests. They overrode their own national interests to support Russia in that sense. So you have countries like also Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar who've come out in favor of Russia. And ASEAN and the other ASEAN members have chosen the opposite. They've criticized Russia. But countries like India, Vietnam, who have huge territorial disputes, some with countries as important as China, nuclear power states, also Pakistan, and they've said nothing about Crimea. So this kind of internationalization of annexations is a threat to them, but they've come out in support. Japan, of course, you can understand its position, but it also has very important interests with Russia, especially with the Kuril Islands, which are occupied by Russia. They're controlled by Russia. And Japan was also, for the past many years, been hoping to sign a peace treaty with Russia, ending the Second World War, which it still hasn't done. And this has put it in a fix as well. So Japan slapped sanctions, Australia slapped sanctions, and Putin was treated so badly at the G20,
Yes.
with Australian Prime Minister even saying that he would shirt front. Shirt front means head bump, it's a rugby term. Putin. So it just explores, how Asian reactions have been. And I think the key factors that it underlines is that the global order is really changing. The West's ability to really strong arm the wider international community into following its line is getting weaker. And the BRICS is really, or the India, Russia, China axis is really emerging as a viable Eastern bloc in that sense. So these are my conclusions for the paper.
Yeah, well, let me, just a couple of thoughts. Where is that appearing, by the way? Where can I find it?
On Global Relations Forum website in the next few days.
Okay, globalrelationsforum.com?
Well, it's gr-forum.org.
Okay, gr-forum.org.
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
great.
We'll tweet it to you, then you can tweet it as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. One reaction, though, is that, is it my imagination, or are we having more international territorial disputes these days? Maybe it's only the press, maybe, the way information flows, we hear about it more, and therefore we think is more of it. But gee, if you could go around the world and count all these unresolved territorial disputes, you'd think that everybody was trying to edge in on their neighbor. You think that everybody was in it for himself and they just wanted to grab a little territory hither and yon and didn't care much about how the next guy's dispute gets resolved. And so we're in a time where it's not comfortable. It's not a good thing. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, Jay, I grew up in Asia, and I'm very well aware that almost each and every country in Asia has territorial disputes with its neighbors. In Europe, in Western, except for the Greek, Cyprus, Turkey issue, let's say, and in North America, there are no territorial disputes, And that's very kind of alien in that sense. Well, it was quite a big issue many decades ago, but not now. There's peace and everybody's at peace with their borders, but it's not been the same in Asia. I think these territorial disputes are coming into light grâce à la media, thanks to the media.
Yes.
But also because, China in particular claims its historical claims on the South China Sea in particular, and it came up fairly recently with this nine-dash line concept. So that was recent. I mean, they say they have produced historical maps to that extent, but I mean it's fairly recent. That big huge issue is fairly recent because I think they've also very recently discovered a lot of energy reserves in the South China Sea, vast energy reserves. So.
Well, what it suggests to me, the overarching conclusion for me, Garui, is that you and I are going to have material to talk about forever on an increasing basis. Not only will we not run out, but we'll be faced with more and more of it, so we have to plan to continue these discussions.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
That's Garui Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, gr-forum.org. And you can look at her writing there and see what she's saying about so many things. Thank you so much, Garui. Thank you for staying late and talking with us midnight in Brussels.
Thank you, Jay. My pleasure entirely.
Aloha.